welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series showcasing my dear friend David Parker. He is the author of two excellent books, Income and Wealth and A San Francisco Conservative. Again, I'm Tom Martin. I spent many years with different television news organizations, ABC, CBS, CNN, and so on, real alphabet soup there. But I love continually learning, and these conversations are a great way to do that, and I hope you're finding them to be the same. What I'd love to talk about with you, David, welcome, by the way, great to see you there in San Francisco.
Thank you, glad to be here.
Is I know a couple of times in our conversations you've talked about what a turning point 1933 was for our nation. Sometimes people praise, Franklin Roosevelt and the meetings with Churchill and Stalin and all of that. But it sounds to me like there was some real damage was done in 1933 and earlier in the Biden administration. I forget if he used this phrase or if it was just journalists like myself saying he's putting together a real FDR style package. In other words, it's going to cover everything and cost trillions of dollars. So I'd love to, what was the significance of 1933 and what effects are we feeling?
The real significance is that we can't reverse it. Even if it was a good idea at the time, which it wasn't, but maybe you have to try something and see if it works or not. And if it doesn't work, you stop and turn it around.
To invite government to every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, government being in our life. We were a nation of very responsible citizens. One of my big themes in San Francisco Conservatives is the founding fathers got it right. They just didn't make up stuff in the Constitution. They studied 5th century Athens. They studied 1st century Rome for modern government, and they read all important authors of the Age of Enlightenment: Adam Smith, David Hume, and John Locke. And they put together what they thought was a one-page, very general constitution, one that they said that would last forever. It can handle any issue that could come up in the future that they can't imagine. Gay rights, they couldn't have imagined that at that time. The Constitution just says we're going to elect your legislatures, let the legislature make laws, and if the laws are not breaking the Constitution, it's fine. So we have a one-page document. It's great. And why can't we just stick to that? And that's the real split. And people don't quite articulate that. But in this country, the red and blue, liberal conservative, is over-interpretation of the Constitution.
And what about the progressives?
Yeah, progressives say that's the very definition of progressivism, is moving forward, progressing from what? The Constitution, not from anything. And when Franklin Roosevelt in 1933 says, let's do all these things here to bring the economy back and put people to work and give them Social Security and unemployment insurance and healthcare and education, give them everything that they need. Forget about the private sector. It's completely in violation of everything that we stood for. Tocqueville in his day came here, he couldn't believe how responsible American citizens were. So that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. And people come here for that opportunity to be self-responsible for their life. Tocqueville says, get rid of slavery. You guys are idiots. Stop it. But beyond that stupid thing, you are going to be the greatest country in the world by hands down.
What about government, government bailouts in more recent times? I think of, Barack Obama and the banking industry.
You can distinguish between temporary and permanent. The 2008 financial crisis was handled correctly, in my opinion, because some of those banks had to be bailed out because we were at risk of destroying the financial system, and then the country might collapse, and the world could collapse if the American dollar, if there's no dollar anymore in the world. We cannot let the financial system collapse. And but he did that by loaning banks that he thought would pay it back. He didn't give it to Lehman Brothers. He says, you guys are not going to be able to pay it back. You guys are so screwed up. But some banks were more responsible. They just got caught up in, and they went over their head. So he loaned it to banks who would pay it back, and they did. And they paid it back with interest. And Obama says, if you don't pay it back, we're taking your bank. And that was a fair threat, and it got paid back. Taxpayers made money on it. During the COVID, that's a temporary situation. There's nothing wrong with government helping people who are about to starve, or businesses that are about to crash, that maybe if they had a little money, they wouldn't crash. They could just hold on a little longer. But they didn't make it alone. They just gave it to them. They gave money to 100 million people, or some huge number, because we can't be screening 100 million people. We need the money tomorrow. So they just gave it out. Yeah, when there should be a line item on their 1040 tax return that says, I'll pay it back $500 a year or $1,000 a year for 20 years. Then you would have 50 million of those people saying, oh, if I have to pay it back, I don't really need it. I'm just pretending that I need it. Or I have to take from my own savings, I guess, to cover myself during your downturn. So that was really sloppy. So for a president to run for office, continuing that, saying, I'm going to waive college debt. Maybe I'll give free at Hillary Clinton when she ran for president. I'm going to make college free for everybody. Just saying anything to get elected.
Bernie Sanders made some big promises.
Bernie Sanders, he's going to pay for everything beyond college. He's going to pay for your food, clothing, shelter, automobile, and trips around the world.
Right.
So you'd be happy.
Right.
And somebody asked Bernie Sanders once, what country do you have? What's your model? Where do you get these ideas? Oh, Denmark, that's a good country. They pay for everything over there. And then prime minister or ambassador, maybe ambassador from Denver, was speaking at Harvard. He says, whoa, don't be looking at Denmark. We're like Sweden. We're in the process of dismantling that whole thought process. You're looking at the wrong country.
Wow, amazing. Amazing.
You guys, you're going in the wrong direction. It's a little bit late. It's not 1848 anymore.
Amazing. Well, I want to just mention real quick, for viewers and listeners joining us right now, you are watching and listening to a San Francisco conservative. That's not just the description Mr. David Parker has imposed on himself, but it's the name of his latest book, wonderful book, A San Francisco Conservative, as well as his previous book is excellent too, Income and Wealth. So David, we just have a couple of minutes left, but how do we undo this damage? It sounds like it's been a kind of a ripple effect with that growing national debt. And, to be, full confession, I tend to, not always, but more often vote for Democratic candidates for president. And I can't resist saying that when Trump was president, it seemed like he increased the debt as well. So it's not like he undid it by any means. So how do we get back from this state of affairs?
That's the real sad thing. We may have signed our death warrant as a nation. Russia signed their death warrant as a nation. They can't come back. They're an impoverished third world country with nuclear weapons. Cuba had the revolution in 1959. If you go there today, it looks like 1959. There's a 1959 Chevrolet. It's stopped cold in its tracks. Yeah. North Korea, I wouldn't call that a forward-looking nation. Vietnam, when there was one of those Davos economic summits in Switzerland, I believe, when Nelson Mandela had become president, and he was talking to one of the ministers from Vietnam. It wasn't North Vietnam anymore, it was Vietnam. He says, we're looking at you. We're going to put in the African National Conference. We're going to put in a somewhat socialist, European socialist system here. And the Vietnamese person says, don't do that. That was the hugest mistake we ever made. I don't know why we were fighting the United States to put in a communist economy. We're reversing all of that very gradually and very subtly. Don't do that. Go with the free market. Learn from us. Learn from Russia. Don't do that.
Yeah.
He told Nelson Mandela, don't do that. And Mandela didn't.
Yeah. Well, let me just for the next, we have just a minute or two left in this conversation, but is it a matter of a great leader stepping forward who sees the reality that we're headed down this very dangerous road? Or do you think
Yes,
the people are waking up, or both? I don't know.
both. A great leader has to emerge. And Donald Trump was not a great leader, but there was a consensus in the country in 2016 that neither political party had any intention of solving the problems that all Americans care about. We all care about high costs of healthcare. It's 3 times what it should cost and 3 times what it costs anywhere else in the world. So it's proof of that. And they're disappointed in the public schools that are not doing well. Silicon Valley is 71% are foreign born. They won't hire an American. They're not qualified. And lax law enforcement in general, petty theft to immigration. We're not enforcing the law. Even environment, all you have to do is enforce the law, property rights, clean air and water, and sue people who are polluting. But that's not being enforced. Let's try somebody new. The polls showed 90% for Hillary, some polls, and all polls showed clean victory for Hillary. When people got into the voting booth, they held their nose, they lied in the polls. Let's try something new. Let's try something destructive. Let's try something, see what happens. If Donald Trump knew that he really was a destructive person, he might have done something. But he was just destructive without knowing what to do about it. He has no political training. He was incompetent. But that was the first step. Maybe somebody who's as destructive as Donald Trump, but who's highly educated and a decent person, and says we're going to spend within our budget and we're going to gradually reduce our government programs and think about going back to founding fathers. They got it right. In 1933, they got it wrong, just like 1917 in Russia, the Bolshevik Revolution, they got it wrong. And people are not ready yet, but it's happening.
No, it's interesting. It's funny. I can't resist throwing in, I mean, this is a little off topic perhaps, but one of my favorite comedians, a guy by the name of John Mulaney, said that electing Donald Trump, putting him in the White House, is like having a horse in the airport. I've never seen a horse in the airport. What's going to happen? It's going to be interesting. Yes, it will. So I don't know, but anyway.
Yeah, the nation is slowly turning. No candidate has stepped forward who can do it. I like to give an example from one of the musicians in my band who was in a Brooklyn barbershop. I couldn't go there, but he went there. And somebody stood up and says, government's got to spend more money on the poor and the disadvantaged. We got to spend money for education and this and that. And another guy stood up and says, if you can solve problems by spending money, you don't have a problem. This nation is rich. That's not a problem. That means that everybody has got the message now. That guy can say that, more people understand it than we realize. Yeah. So the country is getting closer to having somebody coming and reversing it all.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court called everything that Roosevelt did, the New Deal, unconstitutional. Wow. And he says, well, I'll bust this country. I'll put in 15 more Supreme Court, just 6 more Supreme Court justices, and I'll eliminate checks and balances. I will be the dictator. I will tell you what to do. I will make this country. And he gave a big speech like that.
Wow. Amazing. And well, hopefully we're all waking up. It's interesting. This is certainly an interesting time.
Yeah, that would be woke. That would be a real woke. We wake up to what was reality, not to protecting little college students from having their feelings hurt.
Right. Exactly. Sounds great. Well, thank you for your time once again today. I love the conversation. I want to encourage our viewers and our listeners to be sure to pick up copies of David's books, Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. You can do that by going to his website, davidparkeressays.com, and you can also go to Amazon. So anything you want to add, David?
Well, what I always seem to add is that my 2 books have ideas, just like we talked today, but I'm passionate about them, and it's rich in historical example. There's nothing I'm saying is unsubstantiated, and I talk about a lot, and it's rich in ideas. It's worth it reading my books.
Absolutely.
Everybody will learn something.
I absolutely agree. Well said. So thanks. Great to see you, and look forward to the next time.
All right, great. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.